Hello, welcome to Reanimated. This is the 141st episode of our fair podcast, which is about zombies and other undead stuff. If you've ever listened to it before, you know that the tenets of our podcast are spoilers, zombie news, and titillating conversation. AJ Conrad was here, but now she might have gone mute.
No, I'm here.
There she is. My name's Stuart. Today we're going to be talking about the penultimate, I don't know what the word is for the fourth and third last episodes of season 6 of The Walking Dead. Some pretty good episodes, frankly. Maybe a little slow in both cases, but strong, I feel like. But before we can even get to those, we're going to be talking about some news, and there's a fair amount right now.
Yep, lots going on.
So what's the top billed news story, AJ?
Well, so as many of you hopefully are aware, the Resident Evil franchise was, we thought, wrapping up with the last film. But apparently they are doing a reboot for 6 films. Unclear about whether Mia Jovovich is going to be involved or Paul W. Anderson. It's a little, Paul W. S. Anderson, rather.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would reboot this yet again, but hey, it has been an extraordinarily lucrative franchise, so you can kind of see why. It would make me very sad not to have either of those folks involved, just because that they are the Resident Evil franchise. But I'm not sure what this would look like or what they would do with it, but that's the word on the street. 6 more Resident Evil films.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, I haven't seen the last one, and maybe we haven't seen the second to last one either. We certainly haven't reviewed it.
I have not seen the last 2, so
yeah. So we're still gonna review those, but I think the show, the series has definitely petered out in terms of like original ideas and story. They've gone away from the good scares, the decent horror plot of the first, and to a lesser extent the second movie. So it's, I don't know what they can do. 6 movies is a lot of movies to do on any topic, let alone one that's been so plumbed. They do have a lot of content from the video games that they have not yet, tackled, but we'll have to see. So, yeah, I guess we're not even really that excited about this announcement, which is weird because I've enjoyed some of these films.
No, I mean, I have too, but I do feel like they need to move on to something else. And I do feel without the key components of Mia and Mr. Anderson that I'm not sure what you do with that. But, apparently...
Maybe exactly what it needs is fresh blood, like a different person writing, a different actor being... maybe they're not even going to be Alice. Maybe it'll be some, there's plenty of characters in that universe.
True.
So yeah, we'll see how they do. Also, an interesting zombie material is a new novel by M.R. Carey. He who wrote She Who Brings Gifts. The girl with all the gifts. Sorry.
Yeah, when I first saw the title of this, I said, wow, he really is a one-trick pony in terms of these titles, before realizing that it was a prequel to The Girl with All the Gifts.
Yeah.
So it is called The Boy on the Bridge. And it mainly deals with the crew from the armored vehicle, or it was like basically a
mobile
lab to try to find a cure for whatever this was, and to do more. So it's about the crew of the Rosalind Franklin. And apparently it's pretty bleak, as you would probably imagine, given that we all know what happens in Girl with All the Gifts. But supposedly it is well written and well done, so it gets a pretty decent review. We'll throw it into the show notes. There was one from NPR that looks all right. So I'd probably take a look at this.
What are the odds that it's going to be a movie? Is that already being considered?
I didn't see that, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Girl with All the Gifts was received very well, and this seems to be a story that people would probably want to see. So my
Yeah,
guess is probably yes.
it was definitely a tie-in in the film, or that they had a nod to the people in the photographs on the Rosalind Franklin, like, oh, what happened to them? Like it was a mystery, an unsolved mystery. So I think the idea was that the children hungries in the city of London, in the neighborhood where what's his name was killed,
Yep,
Flanagan? No, what the hell was his name?
I know who you mean, but
Kieran
yeah,
O'Malley or whatever. I forget his name. But yeah, I think the idea was that those children had killed the crew,
right,
but it was never answered. And so it'll be interesting to see if, well, A, if the book is great, and B, should they choose to, if they'll do another movie adaptation. And I don't know how successful the film was, that if it would make sense for them to do that.
right. But we seeing as how they're rebooting an entire series, I don't know that there is there's precedent for beating a dead horse, so to speak. So
Yeah. Well, let me just see what the box office was for. I feel like when we did the review, it was pretty bad. Yeah, $2.3 million in the U.S. That's horrendous.
it is, but it did much better overseas. So I don't know.
Overseas, it did not that much better.
Oh, for some reason I thought it. Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
I'm looking at
Huh.
$1.3 million in the UK
Oh,
as of,
I think it was our surprise that it hadn't done as well because it was
yeah,
actually a pretty decent film from what I
yeah, and
remember.
a good adaptation,
Right.
very faithful. But yeah, it didn't break $1 million in any other country that it played in.
Although maybe if they release it in China, it will do well there. Um, so, which in our next little news item. So in the past, China has not allowed many horror films to be released there. Nothing with an amount of violence or like military action and things like that. So, of course, that includes any zombie-related genre film. But recently they have been opening up the door a bit, and in fact to the latest Resident Evil film, as well as to Logan, which was pretty violent, and I think the last Pirates of the Caribbean, the most recent installment of that never-ending franchise. I did not expect that a franchise that was based upon a ride at Disney World could get this many films squeezed out of it, but I was incorrect. So they do some minor editing, but apparently they only took, I think, just a few minutes out of Resident Evil. My guess is Train to Busan is not going to be making a debut there, but it's interesting that they've made this decision, and in part it is to elevate or pull up the failing box office there. So
Apparently,
curious.
growth had sunk quite a bit. They're still making money, but they were only three. They only made their margins were 3% in 2016, as opposed to like 50% the year before.
Right. So definitely curious to see if that continues. That trend continues. Um, and lastly, we have a news item about our good friend Stephen Yoon, which is on point given these seasons and all the stuff going on with Walking Dead. I had heard that he was starting, looking at different films and definitely getting involved in other projects. I'll admit I was very surprised to see that immediately after Walking Dead, he chose to get involved with a film that has a similar theme, which is it's an action thriller horror film called Mayhem. He plays a lawyer, a corporate lawyer or something. And he basically, it has a 28 Days Later theme to it with like a very fast moving virus. And it is getting very good reviews. You just normally see actors who have been associated with a genre like Walking Dead trying to do something completely different to establish that they are capable of doing other things in the acting realm. But maybe Steven is just like, hey, I know which side my bread is buttered on, and I know who my fans are, and this is what I'm doing. So I would probably see this based upon the reviews. It actually looks pretty good.
Yeah, I would definitely see him in another action oriented. And if
Yeah,
it's an action thing that has zombies in it, well, of course he's speaking our language. So, you know what? He
right.
knows he has a built-in fan base
No, that's what I'm
of
saying.
people
There's
who
nothing
love
wrong with
seeing
it.
him do this exact thing. And so why not? Yeah. But as you're saying, like bread buttered, etc. But he's clearly an actor with skill. Like he doesn't need to
Oh,
do
no.
this.
No, definitely not. I mean, he doesn't need to. Maybe he likes it. And look, his fans adore him. So if this is something that he enjoys and likes it and likes this fan base, then I don't see why not. I guess you just usually see people dissociating themselves from, just trying to branch out a little bit. I'm not saying he need to be in something like a Bridges of Madison County type thing. But usually you see people trying to do something else. But I think, based upon the things that I'm seeing here, I am psyched to see this. So I cannot wait till this gets released. But this isn't
It,
out till next year, correct? At least for the general public. I think it's going to debut at Cannes.
oh, okay. I thought it was already. I thought I saw some stuff that was already kind of reviewing it. I assumed that maybe that's just early screeners for other festivals or something. But
Yeah, I think that's kind of what they were saying, but I thought it wasn't coming out till it's early. It's gonna be
oh, it came out
oh
at South by Southwest.
yeah. So it's gonna release in theaters and on demand fourth quarter, so like end of the year, and
Yeah, not
then
too not
and
too
then it
far away.
has a streaming premiere in 2018. Okay, so not too far. So I
So
look forward to
other
that.
other Walking Dead actors who've gone on to do other projects, though, it was kind of like I forget the chick who played Beth. What's her name? Do you recall?
I don't remember the actor's name, but I know.
She went on to just do her like music career, but she's still doing cons. T T Dog, Irony Singleton still does. I think they all just keep doing the cons, the conventions. And Lizzie and Mika, I follow those actors on Twitter, and they were both in Munich last week for the like some Bavarian Comic Con,
Weird.
and yeah, tweeting in German even. So it's interesting. Like I don't know exactly what projects they're all doing acting wise. I think a lot of people go back and forth from stage and screen. It seems like.
Right. And then didn't the actor who plays Lori, she ended up she was in like a series, like a sci-fi series.
Colony, which is
Colony.
ongoing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's real. I really enjoy that show.
Yeah.
And
And
she plays a much. I mean, she wasn't super likable on Walking Dead, right? She was
no.
sometimes, but most of the time we were upset with her map reading and driving skills and
Yeah.
losing Carl. She still manages to lose her children in Colony, but it's less her fault.
Yeah.
She's an interesting actor. I like watching her
I like
work.
her too. And Sarah Callies or something like that. That's her name, right?
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's it.
but yeah, she's a lot more likable in that particular series. But to her credit, Lori was not supposed to really be a likable character anyway in The Walking Dead, and I felt like she did what she needed to do with that character. She is a character that you're supposed to have conflicting feelings about, and in that sense, she definitely played that role to the hilt. So yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, that's thinking back, like her and Carl are Rick's only motivation for survival for several episodes or for a long period of time in the very beginning of this show. And so for her to become this like area of conflict for him is good writing. That was some good decision making by Kirkman
Yep.
originally. However, Walking Dead, we obviously can't stop talking about it. Season 6, episodes 13 and 14. The Same Boat is the name of 13, and it was written by Angela Kang and directed by Billy Gearhart. Came out in March 2016. 12.5 million viewers. We left off with the satellite station raid, and suddenly the voice of Alicia Witt coming over the radio. And
Mm-hmm.
we already waxed about how much we like her as an actor also. And
Yeah, I'll admit, as I said, I totally forgot about this her role in this, and it was like a pleasant. It was like it was just a pleasant reminder or a pleasant surprise. Like the minute she made her, like her voice came on, I said, "Oh, I totally forgot about that," and she is pretty amazing in
yeah, and
this.
she had just come off of Justified, one of the seasons of Justified, where she played like the a paralegal sister of a family of hillbilly criminals
Hmm?
who was like sucked into their criminal life, even though she'd kind of gone straight. She very similar kind of character though, smart and tough, and although this one is clearly more hands on.
Yeah, a
So
little bit.
she's a very good actor, and this was an very interesting episode, despite the fact that the pacing was a little bit slow. But I don't say that as a pejorative. It was a small, tight, focused story that unfolded in a with a slow, but it was correct. I feel like the pacing.
The pacing was correct. I do feel, and I did feel watching this, I enjoyed it overall, like 90% positive feelings about it. I do feel like some of the monologuing gets it's a little too much for a couple of the characters, and it's and I understand why, and they're trying to develop a storyline and trying to give you a background and why certain people have made choices and things like that. But there was a couple of spots where I'm like, okay, guys, cut to the chase.
Yeah.
So
Are you referring to where Shell is talking about her boyfriend and the
that,
baby that she was supposed to
yes,
have or
there was
something?
that.
And then
That's yes.
actually Alicia Witt also has a monologue where she's talking about her boss.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I understand why they do it, and there's clearly like, and we'll get into why, but that section went on a little bit too long for me, and
Yeah.
I
It
didn't
did seem
think
like they were volunteering a little bit too much information for being the hostage takers.
right,
That's the only
and for how they were displaying their disdain for their hostages, I just didn't feel that that made sense,
yeah.
but there's a reason for it. So, you ready to jump in?
I feel like we already are. But yeah, so
Well, hardcore jump in.
we pick up back when Carol and Maggie had been having that argument about Maggie shouldn't have been out in the woods, and then zombies show up and they go off to dispatch them, and then that's kind of pretty much where the episode starts.
Right. So they're basically taken hostage by this group, and they're led by Alicia, by our good friend Alicia.
Paula is her character.
I know, but I'm gonna call her Alicia because it's the best.
Fair.
Fine, we can call her Paula, I guess. But in any case, she's clearly in charge of this group. We've got her and this older woman, Molly, and this other guy, Donnie. And Donnie has been injured, so there's some
By Carol.
yeah, so there's some anger about that going on, and they basically supposedly are negotiating a prisoner exchange with Rick, but really they're just trying to hold up so the rest of the saviors can come in and grab them. And so they go to this slaughterhouse where there's like different floors of walkers that are basically there to keep people out and in as well. And this is where a lot of our action takes place. We've got a lot of acting by Carol going on, as we have seen in the past. She fakes being weaker than she is, and there is a funny moment with all of that stuff going on where Maggie gives Carol this look like, "What is wrong with you?" And Maggie believes it, or does she? I don't know. It just is this interesting exchange. I think Maggie actually knows what's up, but she seems a little shocked because Carol like reveals to the group as a way to get sympathy that Maggie's pregnant, that they can't hurt the
Hmm.
baby, and all this other stuff, and then starts to like totally crazily hyperventilate. Which I think if she had actually been hyperventilating, even faking it, I think she absolutely would have passed out. What are your thoughts on that?
She hyper either for real or fakes hyperventilating for a good
A
minute or two,
long
which I think
time.
is enough time, especially when you're breathing around a gag, to probably make yourself pass out. But hey, what better way to pass the time than you're a hostage? Before we get to the slaughterhouse, though, there was a scene when they're driving in the car, which I think was very telling, because we don't know if they've managed to kill all the saviors or not. They've killed 32 of them by the time this episode begins, and a hand, as we like to point out. Um, and then Alicia's Paul is on the radio, and they are exhibiting very precise and well planned communications discipline and procedure, where she's talking about, all right, hey, this channel is compromised, switch to this channel, and there's a lot of very precise communication talk going on. But what is most telling is, yeah, there's still other saviors out there that they're talking to on the radio, which I think we don't really know the whole picture yet, but Rick isn't privy to this information, I assume, although maybe he can hear that first conversation where she's talking to the other people about change to this channel. Rick and the others should be pretty concerned at this point.
Yep.
And everybody should be like, oh, wait, that wasn't even, we just killed 24 people in a satellite station, and we've killed another 8 on the road. But that's not even all of them yet? Holy crap.
Right.
And they're all fighters. There's nobody, I mean, Alexandria might be the only community in the zombie apocalypse that doesn't have, where the entire populace isn't fighters. Mm-hmm. But there are other saviors out there, and they all seem to be more than capable. That's to me, that was quite telling in the car on the way to the slaughterhouse. And then once you get there, yeah, there are a lot of interesting conversations. The dynamic is very fraught. Just all 4 of the characters of the saviors are interesting. The guy who plays Donnie was also in Banshee, which is a Showtime series, where he had a very cool. He's a good actor, just hands down. He's a good actor, and he plays like kind of a. It's weird. Like, this is definitely a girl power episode, and he is the male savior who tries to like assert himself as a man in control, but it's kind of clear that he's not. And the interactions and discussions between Paula and Molly, or Malls as they call her, and Shell, it's just it's very interesting dynamic between the genders here.
Yep. They are definitely, the ladies are definitely in control here. And there's also interesting dynamic and judgment by the women in this crew, especially when Carol is doing her fake like helpless act. There's an enormous amount of disdain that they are showing for her. And I do think that they're a little skeptical of it, because even one of them says, is it Shell or is it Paula, who is like, how did you even survive? How are you still here?
Shell, yeah.
But they don't really take it beyond that. And Carol plays it up pretty well. But there is some of what unfolds in this episode, and just this is why I think they do all the extensive monologuing between the characters, is to show the different choices that the different groups have made, and their justification of that. And you especially see that with Paula's monologue with Carol, just revealing like way too much. And again, I think that we see the careful communication between the other saviors, and between Paula and the other saviors on the walkie-talkie, and the precautions that they have taken. So this is part of why I was skeptical about it, is that I just don't feel that they would reveal even that much information to people that they are considering as prisoners at this point. And that's not to say that, I mean, we have seen that the saviors do try to bring people in. They do it in a very brutal way, and so perhaps that may be some of that, but I just don't feel like they would even go this far as to share the details that they do, because they would view that as being sort of opening up a vulnerability, or displaying some sort of vulnerability. And so it didn't make a ton of sense to me.
Well, they seem to think that Maggie and Carol are both weak. Like Carol, because of the way she's acting, and there's a scene where Paula says, I know exactly who you are. I see exactly who you are, Carol. And we're like, uh-oh. And then she's like, you're pathetic. And we're like, no, it's cool. She doesn't really know anything.
Yeah, that was definitely that was a little psych move.
Yeah. And Maggie, they're like, oh, you chose to get pregnant. You're dumb. Even though that is also another really interesting part of this episode, where all of the hostage takers, except for Donnie, who's just whatever, and maybe not Paula, but Molly and Shell both do acts that are kind to the hostages, Like Malls gives Carol a cigarette and generally seems kind of nice, even though she's like an old badass with lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end of the episode, I think Shell does something that basically gets her killed. Um, but for being badasses, this episode also does a really good job of tilting the balance of who is in the right. And Shell even comes out and says, "You guys, you're not the good guys. You should understand that." And they call Carol and Maggie murderous bitches because they've been, look at what they just did at the satellite station. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're definitely forced to begin thinking more seriously about Rick's group being the antagonists versus the saviors. I mean, even their name is, something that should inspire hope. Rick's group doesn't have a name. They're just a bunch of crazy people out there killing people, as far as anybody else on the outside looking in can tell.
Well, true, but then some of the stories that you hear from Paula and from Shells and like they are coming from a pretty dark place. And so even with Paula shares her background and her background like story in terms of what happened when DC went down.
Yeah.
She's working like for probably some kind of politician or something like that, isn't allowed to go back to her family, and worries that this dumbass boss of hers is going to get her killed. And so she kills him first. Nobody in Rick's group has made that kind of a decision
No. And
to
and
do
as we
that.
figured out, Carol didn't even kill a person until
Right.
pretty late in the game, and I forget who it was. It was Lizzie's dad, Lizzie and Mika's dad.
Right.
First person she killed.
And so while, it's interesting at first, just at first listen or at first watch, you're kind of thinking, oh, maybe these saviors are what they're saying. All the stories they are telling are very different from what happened with Rick's group. So yes, you can kind of make some of these assumptions or come to these conclusions, but there still is a distinction. And, Maggie, in terms of what she's doing, she's looking out for the survival of her baby. They are protecting people that are not fighters. So that also changes the dynamic of what they are doing.
True.
And Maggie is actually connected. She's married to Glenn. There is at least an assumption that all these people feel as if they're family. You don't feel like that with the saviors at all. Like you don't feel that they are family. I mean, I definitely think that this group, to some extent, cares a little bit about each other, but not that much more from a survival and a tactician point of view, as opposed to a really truly caring about people. Although I suspect Paula does care about Malls, given her reaction to her death. Maybe not about Ronnie as much, and she basically says as much that she
Well,
could
she
just
says she
ditch
could
him.
kill him in her
Yeah,
sleep or in his sleep. Yeah.
yeah. And then even Shells talks about her pregnancy and about the guy she's with, and says similar things that Paul is saying about Ronnie. So
Donnie.
sorry, Donnie, Donnie, Ronnie, interchangeable, whatever. But so I do think that they're drawing that distinction, and they're also giving you like a lot of clues about what kind of, and we already knew obviously some of the things about the saviors that are not so savory, just because we've seen just from on the periphery the things that they have done and how
Yeah.
they interact and how they take over things.
Yeah.
They are not by any means the good guys,
No.
but it's interesting to hear that that's what they think about themselves somehow to justify the things that they're doing. So,
Or maybe Shell isn't saying we're the good guys. Maybe she's saying there are no good guys.
maybe.
There's a chance.
there is.
Um,
It's interesting though that that they are. Do you find it interesting that Carol reveals, like during all of this monologue, that Carol is trying to gain some sympathy by saying, "Oh, we did this for survival," and then Paula knocks her back and says, "No, because you guys just totally attacked us unprovoked on the whole satellite station." Do you think it's interesting? I find it interesting that Carol revealed that they had killed the saviors, because that's an admission would have thought is something you don't want to say at all, to own up to the blowing up of the motorcycle saviors.
yes and no. I mean, you can find out whether or not they know about those guys being gone. That's one way you can do it. I think she's not revealing that they have an agreement with Hilltop. At least
True.
she's withholding that information.
True.
And they have to have some kind of believable story for why they just went and killed 24 people.
Right. No, that's true. But it's interesting. But all of this ultimately ends up as it comes to as their time in the slaughterhouse comes to a head and it gets a little bit more dire. I know that they're
Hmm.
worried. There's all this talk that they're going to get moved and that there's a group of saviors coming in, and Maggie and Carol act decisively.
Yeah, that goes
And
quick.
yep. And once these events start cascading, it just kind of goes from there. But it's interesting because Maggie is definitely the person pushing all of this forward. Carol is acting a little strangely here.
Yeah, this is an episode for, well, Carol and Paula are definitely thrown together. Their stories, Paula telling Carol her side of things when Maggie's not in the room, basically, and you're like, and so Carol is already, even in her pretending to be weak, she's actually sharing more details about her real life than she usually does when she's in this scenario, or she
Mm-hmm.
has in the past. She's like, my husband Ed, my daughter. Um, I cared for her. I forget exactly when she brings up Sophia, but she talks about both of her family members, and it feels, well, it always feels real because it's also Melissa McBride, and how does she? I don't know. She's an incredible actor, and she can do
Mm-hmm.
things with her face. And Carol is apparently a magnificent actor too, by association. Um, but so Carol is clear. It seems like we can't tell the difference between her acting weak and also acting conflicted as real Carol. And
Right.
and we get to see a lot more of this conflict, internal turmoil, and she even brings it up after they've. You know what? The Saviors actually do them a huge favor and split up. Like none of them are together.
Mm-hmm.
They leave them in the room with Donnie, who they didn't know was dead, but he was dead. They leave Carol just in a room with him, and then yeah, Malls is by herself, Shell's by herself, Paul. They're all just alone because they go out to like clear the hallways because this slaughterhouse is apparently just full of zombies wandering around.
Right. But I think part of why they felt comfortable doing that is that they didn't view Maggie or Carol as threats.
Hmm.
So they feel all right. Just,
It's classic Sun Tzu Art of War. Appear weak when you are strong, and appear strong when you are weak.
yep.
They need to just read their ancient Chinese texts.
But they didn't, so it ends poorly for them.
It really does, and it goes so like you said, it goes fast. Carol starts cutting through the duct tape on her hands with a little crucifix that she's picked up and used as a prop in her whole charade, and we just see her like poke one tiny hole in this large area of tape, and then we cut, and she's free,
Yeah,
you
like
know.
lickety split. She's out of there.
And Maggie is as hard as she can, like trying to cut her own tape bonds. And then it's interesting because, yeah, like you said, Maggie's driving this train of we have to finish what we started. Carol's like, let's just get out of here. Maggie says, no, we can't. We have to kill them all.
Which is
Why does
very
Maggie?
which is very
Yeah.
interesting because normally it would be Carol saying exactly what Maggie's saying.
Well,
So
they're
this
also
is
like Terminus. You remember Terminus chapter 2, right? When they came to the church
mhm.
and killed Bob. Like this is certainly informing their actions, or at least Maggie's. I don't know, because of Carol's issues that she's having, she's not having that reaction. But Maggie, I think, is thinking this through and saying, no, we can't leave any of them alive, not
Nope.
now.
Not at the moment because they just run a risk. And also, hey, look what happened when. And it's interesting because Carol saw what happened with the wolf that Morgan had saved, but maybe because he helped out the good doctor, maybe that's part of why she's more reluctant, is because she is coming a little more over to what Morgan is saying. But in any case, there are definitely some moments where Carol pauses, and one of those moments is when Paula comes in, catches them, and Carol absolutely hesitates, and it's Maggie who has to take care of business. But then on the opposite side, Shell almost kills Maggie, and Carol decisively just shoots down Shell with no hesitation whatsoever.
Yeah, she was
So
apparently just hanging out around the corner. I don't know why she wasn't more involved in that fight.
yeah,
Um, but they, Paula was still mixed in there. So that's the scene though where I think Shell hesitates, and I think it's because she goes to she calls Maggie a lying bitch and goes to cut her and cuts her
In
at
her
the
stomach,
abdomen,
yeah.
but I don't think it actually makes any contact, just cuts
No.
her shirt. And we see Maggie look down and like hold her shirt. I'm like, you're in the middle of a fight. I don't think you have time for this.
Nope.
And but then Shell doesn't move. Shell's like frozen, and
Yep.
which is when Carol just walks around the corner and bang. But I think that's another one of these moments where they're humans. They're like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be stabbing a pregnant lady. I think is kind of what we're taking away from that.
Right. And then this, they take down a lot of the walkers, and they, it's a pretty horrible takedown because we do see Paula a little bit later, who's basically had her whole face eaten off.
Her death is horrendous,
It's
yeah.
pretty rough.
But she chooses to go out the hard way. Carol gives her every chance to actually even run away,
Yep.
even though, but
Maggie's
she's
horrified
yeah.
by that, but yeah. And then they actually wait for, because they know that some of the saviors are coming, and then they ambush them, and kill them like in one of the slaughter rooms, with gasoline.
Carol's even does the mimic thing on the radio. I mean, that's
Yeah.
some next level stuff. She
Yep.
sounds just like Alicia Witt.
Yep.
She's got the vocal fry and everything.
Yep. So they've got that going on. So by the time Rick and the rest of the Scooby Gang come in, um, they are ready to get out. But you know, they've got they've got the prisoner with them, their prisoner,
Yeah,
Rick's group.
primo.
And basically Rick just shoots him. So
Yeah, and we cut to Carol's face as this is happening because I think she realizes that they're not doing everything the right way.
right.
Because they've all been saying we're all Negan,
Mm-hmm.
but she knows that this guy's name is Primo, and
Yep.
so when he says, "Hey, I'm Negan, man, let's talk," which is a weird thing, he's like, "Let's have a conversation," and Rick shoots him immediately. He doesn't want to talk to him.
Nope.
I mean, so much of this whole action, this attack on the satellite station, was done without intelligence
Yep.
and or reconnaissance, and this is just more of that. Like Rick is making bad decisions and not choosing to do things in a patient or timely way.
Yeah, but do you
But
think
with
part of that is that he's just feeling like they've been burned by hesitating before? So I feel like that's part of why he's doing that, but it isn't necessarily a good decision.
when have they been burned by hesitation?
Well, when they with Jesus and he destroys all their stuff. So they're kind of like ultimately that works out for them in the end, but in the first instance of this, they're now into this whole crazy battle thing going on. So I
They
feel
didn't.
like
I mean, they didn't stake out Terminus, which they could have.
true, true, true. So anyway, I do think he's just trying to act decisively, but in this case, it wasn't good. And Carol doesn't actually speak up here either and say, "Hey, they say that everybody's Negan. Maybe we should keep him for questioning." But it is a little fast. So
It goes too fast, but like I have to wonder. It doesn't happen on screen, but does Carol tell him? His name wasn't actually Negan; it was Primo, which does just mean number one. So maybe that's
maybe they
maybe
thought
he
it was
was
the
Negan,
same.
and that was his
Yeah.
other nickname. Yeah. Or maybe they really do have this group identity, but it doesn't. Yeah, by the end of this episode, I think we kind of think that Negan is dead, whether
Yeah.
he was one person or many people. Because guess what? They've just killed 11 more people. I think there were 6 people in the scouting group. It's kind of hard to tell in that fire scene. The four, Paula's team of 4 and Primo, 11 more. That brings our total up to 43
Yes,
saviors.
but we still haven't seen some of the ones that were in the woods, nor the people that like when Daryl was involved. So we haven't seen those folks again.
We never really saw any of their faces except for Cameron and the
True,
hand.
but we know that there's no one hand man that was killed. So
Oh.
we know that, but they don't know that. So all right, so on to the next episode.
Twice as far.
Yep. Um, and this is
It's a weird episode.
this is a weird episode. I don't know how I feel about this episode.
It's confusing. Like the pre-credits scene, the cold open is confusing to me. I'm not sure if it's the same day we're watching over and over again or different days because
Mm-hmm.
they have the same set of scenes, but is it just the same people doing habitual things or is it the same people doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think yeah, it's hard to tell. Basically it's supposed to get across this idea of life is back to normal. Life life is quiet and peaceful in Alexandria, and yet there is a sense of unhappiness
Mm-hmm.
because even though Carol's shacked up now with Tobin, she is pensive and unhappy. Rosita's shacked up with Spencer, and she's unhappy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just weird. I wasn't sure how to feel about this cold open, and then the episode itself, like the meat of it, is fine. It's mostly a story about Daryl, Rosita, and Denise, and then a story about Eugene and Abraham.
Right.
Rick is not in this episode at all, I think.
Mm-mm. Nope.
So it's just about a run, really. It's about two different runs, two like parallel runs. Um, Denise wants to go to an apothecary, and so she takes Daryl and Rosita, and is like, I want to go, and I'll go without you if I have to. I feel like she's the only doctor left in the community. Why? No, bad idea.
Yeah, and I also feel like Daryl and Rosita would have been able to prevail with her and say that and basically, say, hey, if you want training like this or whatever, we can certainly arrange that, but there's too much at risk for you to go on supply runs. It's not like the normal denizens of Alexandria are going on supply runs with them. There are specific people that do it because there's risk involved, and she certainly wouldn't be one of them. So this seemed just sort of like a ridiculous premise to me.
Her reason for going is like, I'll show you what medicines we need. Guess what? They just take all the medicine anyway. They fill up two giant
Right.
backpacks
She
with
doesn't do
everything.
anything. She doesn't even tell them anything. So that's
No,
kind of annoying.
other than where this place was, which is useful, but
But they
she
could
doesn't
have
need to.
find it.
Yeah, this is a very contrived way to get her killed off,
Yep.
and I'm not sure in the grand scheme of the story why she had to go.
Yeah, me
Like the
neither.
thing with her and Tara had only just begun. It felt like it's kind of weird.
But as we said, it also didn't feel super authentic, right? So the thing with her and
Their
Tara,
relationship.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it just felt, and it's not like the actor who plays Denise is amazing. She is really really good, and I like all of her interactions, especially those with Daryl. But I never like the whole thing with her and Tara never made sense to me. Even as she is looking for her orange crush and that weird little like MacGuffin that they keep throwing in there. Like I just feel like it doesn't make sense to me. I don't see enough between them, or they didn't do a good enough job of showing the connection between those two.
Yeah.
To believe that there was as many feels as they appear to be trying to convey.
And consider for a moment Orange Crush and the havoc that it has wreaked on our group. Daryl and his search for Denise's Orange Crush led them to Jesus and losing the truck.
Yeah, Orange Crush, evil.
It's bad. Did you actually see the news story last week that Fanta was created in World War II Germany to compete with Coca-Cola?
I did not.
It's short for Fantastisch, which means fantastic.
Nice.
Anyway,
Well,
Nazi
more
orange
proof.
soda, that's what I'm saying.
More proof. Evil.
Evil.
But anyway, so we got that going on, and then we also have this odd run, which made a little bit more sense between Eugene and Abraham. And basically, like Eugene says, "Hey, we're gonna need some ammunition. I need to go to this place so that we can figure out how to do that." And this seems like a thing that is smart. Their group needs it. They're going to need more. They're running low, and they're not necessarily able to forage for it and know that they have a secure supply. So this makes sense, and it makes sense that Abraham and Eugene would go and do this.
But
What
Eugene doesn't tell Abraham until they get there what they're doing it
Right.
for.
Yeah, what doesn't make sense is in a similar vein for Eugene to want to go out and do this, and both he and Denise seem to have similar ideas. Like somehow they have to prove themselves that they're able to like survive on their own or something. I don't even know. And again, I don't really know why. Like this is your little weird self exploration to show that you can kill walkers. I don't really know, but this all felt very contrived in
Yep.
terms of their little journeys to killing walkers or something.
Yeah. Two parallel stories of weak people trying to be strong. And
Right,
in the, as they are competing, it seems like Denise is winning because she's the one of the two of them who manages to kill a zombie by herself.
right.
But it doesn't last long.
Nope.
And ultimately, Eugene's dick biting skills and using his head, staying cool under pressure, and using his head are what get him through the episode alive.
Right. His
Whereas
his non-traditional fighting skills and survival instincts.
there were a couple of laugh out loud moments in this episode. One is Denise throwing up on her glasses and then
Yes.
saying, "I threw up on my glasses."
Yeah.
And two is Abraham and Eugene's makeup scene at the end of the episode where he's like, I forget exactly the line, but it was like, "You bite a dick like nobody else," or
Yeah,
something.
it's something really insane.
And I mean that in the best way possible. Those,
Right.
there were a couple of really good lines in this episode. Uh,
Right.
but
And
most,
the
yeah.
other lesson though that you can take from here is that all along, both like Daryl and Rosita and Abraham are all like, "Hey, you can do this stuff if you want, but this is why we do things the way that we do." And we don't take risks, and we don't use up ammo on things that are useless. And even when they go to the apothecary and Daryl and Rosita are doing reconnaissance, they kind of hear something. Well, and they tell Denise, no, we're not going to go explore it. There's no reason to because there's no threat. They know that it might be a partial, they know by listening that it could be just a partial walker, but no reason to get involved just because that would be a risk that was needless to take. Yet she has to explore that. And even with that lesson, doesn't learn her lesson. As we see later on the episode. So it's an interesting thing that ultimately these two little soul searchers are wrong and are proven wrong by the people that just keep surviving.
So
But
I agree
okay,
with what you're saying, though, that these two, both of these, quote unquote, weak characters are pushing the envelope and failing. But then the question is, how are you supposed to get good, as they say in the video game world? How are you supposed to do that if the learning curve is like binary? It's like
true. It's either
you
you
either
survive or you don't.
or
I
you're
guess.
dead. And like, and the only way you get better at this zombie fighting stuff is to just keep winning every fight you're in. And that is I think it's just too difficult for normal, and you could consider Denise and Eugene as normal people, like by a modern non-zombie apocalypse measure. I don't know. It's really tough. But clearly they two people go out, only one manages to come back, and I would blame Denise's death again on Daryl and Rosita's lack of situational awareness. How are there 14 people in the woods right next to them and they can't tell?
Yeah, especially Daryl. But yeah, no, there's that. And then there's also his instinct is to not go on the train tracks because bad things happen on the train tracks. These are easily ambushed by people. Other people walk them too, and they know that. And that's part of why they took the long way around. But no, he decides to like go for it this time. And, I feel like he still wouldn't have done that. Though I think he has some sympathy for Denise, and she told the sorry tale of her twin brother Dennis, who she relates to Daryl in some way that Daryl's a little bit like him. And there's all that fun stuff going on.
How are train tracks more ambushy than roads though?
Well, because they weren't using roads, they were just kind of going through the woods. And you're right, they use roads all the time.
They did
But
just it's I could have sworn they took the road. Like they walked
oh,
past the tree and then they were on a road
well,
when they ran into Rosita.
Well, maybe. I just don't. I think his instinct was to stay off the tracks. I don't know exactly why, but that was his
I,
instinct.
yeah, I
And it
thought
was
that
a
was a
good one.
callback to Terminus or something, but yeah.
Well, no, I think that's part of it too, is that bad things happen on tracks. But anyway, but she doesn't, like, that's the other thing, is that you're distracted by all this other stuff, out in the middle of Walker country and Savior country and whatever. It's not a good idea to get distracted, and ultimately that's what happened, and that's why she died.
Calling it distracted is generous because Denise is also yelling, "You could have died killing those saviors!" when
Mm-hmm.
she's getting the orange soda out of the car, and
Yep.
she dies 20 feet later. But so if they didn't, she'd already been yelling like, "There's a cooler in this car, maybe it's," and they're like, "No, we don't need it, blah blah, let's go." But the yelling
Yeah.
is in very stark contrast to the disciplined communications of the Saviors by walkie-talkie in the
Mm-hmm.
previous episode. You don't hear them screaming; they do the whistle thing. Spoiler alert, that's coming up. But
Yep.
these guys are quiet; they don't mess around.
Nope.
And why are Daryl and Rosita not correcting her and being like, no, we don't yell when we're outside the ever really. You don't yell in the zombie apocalypse because yelling doesn't help you.
No, and it attracts walkers, it attracts others. You just don't want to be obvious about where you are. And again, she just doesn't listen to them, and she goes for this stupid cooler, and there's nothing going to be in that cooler that they need. Um, so there's that too. So in any case, ultimately it all ends poorly. The kill shot for her is pretty rough, and it's by an arrow, Daryl's arrow, as we see. Um, and we see that this is and then this is also like when the saviors all come out. It's Dwight with Daryl's crossbow. Like, what an insult! Add insult to injury. And they also have captured Eugene. And Eugene and Abraham have gotten into such a huge fight. And I was wondering what you thought about that. It just seems like a weird pissing contest between them that doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, it was an extremely unlikely series of comments that Eugene makes that piss Abraham off enough that he pretends to leave him out alone in the
I know, it's so
outside. I thought that
ridiculous.
was cool. I was like, oh, he's really just was going to shadow him home all the way. That's just adorable. But
It's
yeah,
kind of it's
Eugene.
kind of like if a little kid throws a tantrum, right? And they're like stuck off on their own, and
Yeah,
they're like, "Oh, you can get home by yourself." I mean, probably not anymore because they'll call Child Protective Services, but
yeah.
it seems like something that would happen in the 70s. Or I vaguely remember my mom doing similar things, and then just they're never actually
Hmm.
leaving you; they're just letting you blow off steam. But yeah, like. And I do like how Eugene is when he calls out the position of Abraham, he knows that Abraham isn't going to just stay there. So I think he did know that. I don't think that was just him acting in a cowardly way.
No,
But you know, and then there's also a nice moment here between Abraham and Rosita, because she covers him and saves him. And so
hmm
whatever might be wrong with them on other levels, basically they still have each other's back. So that's
even
kind
though
of
she's
cool.
still just a ball of anger all the time.
Yeah.
Poor Spencer.
I know, man. He has no idea.
He should not have hooked up with her. He should have found himself a nice, happy lady.
Yep. All he wants to make is like chicken pot pie or whatever. So, yeah. So ultimately, they come out of this with knowing that the saviors are more of an issue,
Yep.
and Dwight has managed to escape.
There were five saviors get away from the ambush that we
Yep.
see. I
Yep.
counted 14 on screen at the beginning of the ambush, and I don't even know if that counted Dwight.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have just killed 9 or 10 more, which puts us now at 50. Oh, where did I write my numbers? We were at 43, so we're at 52 or 53
Yep.
now, dead saviors. So many
Yep.
people.
We should also mention that Dwight has definitely been punished or something for whatever happened before, because his whole face is like burned.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
And he's being much more of a dick than he was earlier in this
Yep.
season when he first ran into Daryl.
Yep. Um, and you know, we got and then we got some relationship stuff going on, because in this particular episode, at the end of it, Abraham manages to win over Sasha with silence and a look, I guess, where
By standing really far away out on the sidewalk from her house.
Yep, and she invites him in. So we got that going on.
Because life's too short for us not to be hooking up.
Right. And you got Abraham and Eugene kind of like, burying the hatchet and with the silly dick comment. And then Daryl is feeling a tremendous amount of guilt over Denise's death, and basically is very much feeling like he should have killed off Dwight and those in the woods, and that's sort of a lesson that he learned. And Carol is in on that whole thing.
There's no Daryl. I don't like to think that Daryl is reconsidering the way he handled the woods, because Sherry and Dwight seemed on the level.
Yeah, they did.
There was nothing to suggest that they were going to double cross him.
Nope. Like, I don't think he could have called that one.
No.
But he still. I understand why he's feeling guilty, though. You could imagine that.
Of course, but.
And then, you got the last scene of this, which is that...
almost as confusing as the beginning of the episode.
Really, I know, where Carol's, like, leaving Alexandria. She leaves a Dear John note to poor Tobin. And then that closes us out, leaving us a little bit more confused than we were from the get-go.
Her leaving isn't confusing in and of itself. It's the effects that they use at the end of the episode with... Her swing chair that she's been sitting in and smoking is empty, but it's the creaking is louder than all get out, and we just have Morgan staring at her porch. Mm-hmm. And then there's some other people wheeling a couple carts of guns towards, looks like they're setting up a convoy to leave the compound, but we don't know why. Mm-hmm. Like, what? Who? Can somebody explain all of these things? Why is Morgan hearing the creaking of the chair so loudly?
Yeah, it's strange.
Why is he staring at Carol's porch? Does he know something? Like, oh, geez, come on, guys.
Yeah, and we didn't see enough of Carol in this to really understand this at all, other than what we saw in the previous episode, that she's definitely traumatized and shell-shocked. And, we've seen a little bit of a struggle, an internal conflict, and she's made that evident in some of the things that she and Morgan have talked about, but it didn't make sense in this episode at all for them to do that. So
in theory, she doesn't want to kill anybody anymore, and she would have to if she stays at Alexandria. That's her reasoning. Why she doesn't just say, hey, Morgan, I like your philosophy. I'm going to hang out with you and not kill anybody. I think because ultimately she still kind of disagrees with him. She still understands the necessity to kill.
Right.
But she's like, if I stay in Alexandria, I'll have to kill more than if I were to leave. I think is that the reasoning?
I guess, but that, to me, that doesn't make complete sense either, because it's not like outside of Alexandria is a picnic. So I don't know what's going on here, but.
And that'll become clearer as we watch the next two episodes, because I believe that she does a lot of killing as soon as she leaves Alexandria.
She does.
Yeah.
So. But on that note, I think we can wrap up these two episodes, and then it'll be on to the final two for season 6.
That's right. So holler at us on email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. ReanimatedPcast is our Twitter handle, and you can also leave comments or just check out our show notes at reanimatedpodcast.com.
Great. Until next time, ciao.
See you later. Thanks for listening.